You are listening to MCC Votes and Seats, the podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Mathias Corvinus Collegium. We provide election insights with experts and politicians. Hello and welcome back to the Votes and Seats podcast. My name is Balin Telthod, and I'm glad you're here with us today as we dive into one of the most important recent political events in Norway, the legislative election held on the 8th of September. We are truly privileged to have Dr. Herman Smith Sivertsen with us today as a special guest expert right from the University of Southeast Norway, where he acts as an associate professor of political science. Good afternoon, Herman. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to be here.
Wonderful. So the results were quite straightforward. With 28% of the votes, Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre's Labour Party managed to secure the most seats, marking a political comeback after years of weak opinion polls. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party, led by former Prime Minister Erna Solberg, slipped to third place for the first time since 2009. Nonetheless, the big story on the opposition side was the rise of the right-wing populist Progress Party, with Sylvi Listhaug now leading the largest opposition force in the Storting, the Norwegian parliament. Altogether, the so-called Red-Green Bloc won 88 seats, giving PM Støre the numbers he needs to remain as head of cabinet, even though he will continue to govern with a minority government. Dear ladies and gents, in today's episode, we will unpack what these results mean for Norway's political landscape, how the balance of power is shifting, and what to watch for in the months ahead. Let's get started. Dear Herman, prior to analyzing the results, I kindly suggest running through the most important Norwegian political parties, as I am sure that our audience, including myself, needs a quick crash course about the major contestants.
Yes, the Conservative Party is very old. It's from 1884. So it has never been the biggest party of Norway, but often it has been the second biggest party of Norway historically, and has had a solid support from the cities, mainly the Oslo area, and also some of the other cities. And the Labour Party is from 1887, so it's also a very old party. And it used to rule Norway a lot, especially in the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. And it had its own majority 16 years after the World War. And the Progress Party, that's a newer party. So they started in 1973 as a tax protest party, protest against high taxes. And they have developed over time and became a stable middle-sized party during the 1990s, and after 2000 they did some very good elections, more than 20%. So they are ideologically libertarian, but they also are busy about immigration, integration, and crime and such things. So they also, to some extent, are conservative. But we have many parties in Norway. We have 9 parties in the parliament. So, and it's a long time since one party had its own majority.
Yeah, later we can talk about the electoral system as well. But now understanding who these parties are and what they stand for helps us make sense of the dynamics that shape the outcome. Now that we've painted that picture, we can dive into the bigger question. Compared to its 2021 performance, to what factors might the Labour Party owe to its more confident election victory this time?
Yes, they had very bad opinion polls like 10 months ago or 9 months ago. But they did something that were fortunate for the Labour Party, that their coalition partner, the Agrarian Centre Party, left the government. So it made it more easy for the Labour Party to use the cabinet of ministers to make a public profile of themselves. And they also were smart to get the former Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Stoltenberg, to join the government as Minister of Finance. And they have been emphasizing safety, both in the world, internationally, and also for the economic situation for Norwegians. They have emphasized safety and stability. And this has been a success for them. And also, it was very good for the Labour Party. It was an advantage for them that the opposition was quarreling who should be the prime minister if there was a change of government.
I see. The Labour's ability to hold onto the top spot and secure another term is, of course, only one side of the story. The other side is how the rest of the political landscape shifted around them, because several of their rivals stumbled this time. The Conservative, the Centre Party, the Socialist left, also their support shrink, losing a notable share of seats in the Storting. So, to really understand the Labour Party's repeated victory, we also have to ask what went wrong for these other parties.
Yes, the Conservative Party has for a long time been criticized that they agree too much with the Labour Party, not on tax issues, but on other issues like relationship to Europe, climate policies, export of electricity, the EEA agreement between Norway and the EU, and so forth. Lots of people think that the Conservative Party is too close to the Labour Party in non-tax issues. And this criticism has been growing, and the Progress Party could take advantage of it.
I see, that's incredible. And we've now looked at how the major opponents of major parties performed at the ballot box. However, the election results don't happen in a vacuum, as we all know. Behind the numbers are the campaigns themselves, the messages the parties choose to emphasize, the techniques they used to reach voters, and the slogans that try to capture their vision. So let's turn now from the outcomes to the strategies. Dear Professor, what were the main themes that the parties, like the Labour, the Conservatives, and the Progress Party, tried to push during the campaign? And how much did these choices shape the final result, in your opinion?
Yes, for a long time there has been a discussion in Norway about the export of electricity because this has led to high prices for Norwegian households and also unstable prices. But the Labour Party have solved it with something they call the Norwegian electricity price, so they can make it rather stable. This will cost money for the state, but they have money for it. So this problem was to some extent solved. So the irritation about the electricity prices have been diminishing during the last months. It was much worse a year ago or 8 months ago. And the Conservatives, they have been campaigning on more police, more defense, and tax cuts, both for households, for workers, and for business. But I would say that these electoral promises, they came too late to make an impression. They came after the summer vacation and not before. And there's also been a big discussion in Norway about how to tax business owners with this net wealth tax. And the problem for the Conservatives and also the Progress Party is that most of the voters don't really understand how this works, because those people who really pay net wealth tax, they are rather few, and they are regarded as rich. So there was a tax debate in the campaign, but it didn't work for the opposition. But there I would say that the Progress Party had an advantage because they have many other issues to talk about. They don't want the climate policies. They are protesting against the state wasting resources. The Progress Party can criticize the rulers and the other parties much more freely than the Conservatives will do on many issues. So we have there's also been a lot of discussion in Norway about the climate policies, like wind turbines on land. Should we have more of them, and should we regulate more rivers for hydroelectric production of electricity? And also, should we have wind turbines at sea? And they would need to be subsidized in Norway. It will cost a lot of money. The Progress Party was protesting against having those wind turbines at sea, simply because it will really cost a lot of money for the state. And the Conservatives could not match that because they agree with the Labour Party about wind turbines at sea, at ships, fleeting turbines. So it was tough for them for the Conservatives to really handle the other issues that the Progress Party were able to raise. But I'll also say that immigration has been an issue in Norway for a long time, but it has not been a very big issue in this election campaign. But we have much debate also about the crime rates, and this is also to some extent related to problems of integration, and to some extent then with the prior immigration.
That's really interesting. Talking about the campaign, were there any differences between the individual parties in terms of the communication methods? they used.
Yes, the Progress Party especially, they are very clever using TikTok.
Mhm.
I don't really view it myself, but the TikTok is very effective in getting out short messages to young people, and many other parties don't use it that much. So Norwegians don't read that much mainstream or traditional media as they did before. But I would also say that the big parties, they have an advantage because they have resources to communicate face to face with the voters in the campaign. And the smaller parties, they don't have resources for that. So the smaller parties have to rely much more on the internet, all kinds of use, especially of Facebook or X or emails and so on. And I would say that the Green Party has been successful in using internet for campaigning. And the Conservatives had a massive campaign where there are lots of people out talking face to face, but it didn't help them. Like the old-fashioned campaigning didn't really help, at least in the case of the Conservative Party.
I understand. We've talked about the big issues that shaped this year's campaign, but to really understand how these messages translated into seats, we also need to look at the system in which the election took place. Norway's electoral framework has its own unique features, from proportional representation to the traditional tug of war between the red and blue blocs that has long defined parliamentary politics there up in the north. These structures set the stage for how votes are turned into power, and they help explain why coalition building and bloc dynamics are so central after every election night. So, before we move further, let's take a few moments to explore how the Norwegian electoral system works and why its attributes matter so much for shaping outcomes.
We have a proportional system. People vote with a party list, and we have 19 constituencies that award the seat. But we also have this national equalization seats that 19 seats are handed out outside the constituencies, dependent on a big national calculation to create justice between the parties in the total seats each party have. But in order to get those adjustment seats or equalization seats, a party needs to be over 4% nationally. And what was important in this election was that the leftist parties, the smaller leftist parties like the Socialist Left Party, the Red Party, and the Green Party, all of them were over 4% and got these extra seats, while a possible coalition partner of the Conservatives, the small Liberal Party, they dropped just below the 4% threshold. By that, they lost maybe 4 seats. That could have helped the opposition to Støre to get the slim majority if the small Liberal Party had been over the 4% threshold nationally. There was a lot of discussion about opinion polls and will the parties manage the threshold, especially these small parties. And also the Christian People's Party managed to get back and pass the threshold. But this also a non-socialist or bourgeois party cooperating with the other non-socialist parties. But it was not enough to help, the right side win over the center-left.
I see. What can we know about Jonas Gahr Støre's government formation negotiations after the election? What kind of policies are expected to dominate this time?
Yeah, the special thing for Norway is that after an election, there is no vote in the parliament for prime minister, for the work of prime minister. If nobody do anything, nobody will ask for a vote of no confidence. The prime minister can just move on and be the prime minister. So we are different from many countries in Europe because there is no such formal vote in the parliament. So the big test for Mr. Støre, Jonas Gahr Støre, will be the budget, and they will soon start discussing it in the new parliament, and it has to be passed before New Year. And probably he would need help from more small parties than during the last parliament. So in the last parliament, the Labour Party could get help from the Socialist Left Party and the Agrarian Centre Party. But now they need 2 more parties in order to pass a budget. So they will probably also need the far left Red Party and also the Green Party, which is also somewhat leftist. The big question is, will the Social Democrats or the Labour Party, will they be able to make a compromise with 4 other parties to the left? Will they be able to do it and pass a budget? Or will there be a crisis of some kind, and will the Labour Party need to go to the other side, to the Conservatives or to Progress, or in order to build a majority for a budget for 2026. So that will be the big test for the Labour government this autumn. Will be the budget.
That's for sure. Thank you, Herman. Now we just got one step closer to understanding Norwegian politics. To conclude this most revealing conversation, let me turn to my favorite topic and take a look at the election map of the country. What do we see on the map after the recent legislative election, and what explains that the southern southwestern territories of Norway are blue while the central and northern regions are red?
Well, it has been like that for a long time, although there are different parties that benefit from it. But for a long time, southern Norway, western Norway have voted differently than eastern and northern Norway. So it has been less socialist. Also, like 80 years ago, or 50 years ago, southern and western Norway is less socialist than eastern and northern Norway. So it has maybe something to do with culture, maybe also that the class differences historically were not that big in western and southern Norway as they were in inland eastern Norway. Because at the coast, people could earn an income from working from fishing or working in shipping, building ships and so on. But in other parts of Norway, especially the east, you needed to own land in order to have good life. And those who didn't own land, they were poor in eastern Norway. But in western Norway and southern Norway, at the coast, there were other possibilities also to make a living. So class has never been that big in western and southern Norway compared to eastern and northern Norway. It has been a very big issue. So it's simply easier to live there also with a small plot of land. Because you are close to the sea. Also in northern Norway, they are close to the sea, but they have for a long time needed to import a lot of food from outside, and this costs money. So there has been a class of merchants in northern Norway. So in northern Norway also has a tradition that people are thinking about class very much. So the egalitarian Norway is on the coast in the south and west. And the more class-based Norway historically is in the east and in the north and in the middle. That would be a brief way of explaining it.
That's very interesting. And what about the traditional urban-rural divide? How does it translate into the Norwegian context?
Yes, we have some parties are doing it much better in places like Oslo, Bergen, Trondheim, and other cities, and that will be like Socialist Left Party and the Green Party, and to some extent also the Liberal Party. They're doing good elections in the big cities. But while we have the Center Party, which is agrarian, is very weak in the cities, but much stronger on the countryside. And the Progress Party is doing very well on the coast of Norway, especially. And the Conservative Party is doing well in suburbs of the cities, those places where you have nice private houses where people live, middle class areas. That's the mainstay of the Conservative Party. And the Social Democrats, they had the advantage that they have relatively good electoral support all over Norway. So they have been unique in that respect. I think, I hope I helped you there, but there is a clear difference between especially the Green and Socialist Left and the Red Party to some extent, and the Liberal Party are doing much better in the cities. I think it might also have something to do with education and what kind of work people have.
Knowing all this, I guess the election result was not a shocker.
There were some surprises, not very big, but some. Both the Labour Party and the Progress Party did a little bit better than the opinion polls had said. And it was also a surprise that the small Liberal Party did not manage to get 4%, because the opinion polls did not show that. They showed an average of 4.3% for the Liberal Party, but they ended up 3.7% and lost 3-4 seats for the non-socialist side by doing that. So a few surprises there were, but we knew that the Christian People's Party would come back, and we knew that the Centre Party would lose seats. There was also a little surprise that the Conservative Party did not manage to become stronger during the last weeks of the campaign, because they fought a very eager and strong campaign, but still got only 14.6% of the vote.
So can we assume that the opinion polls proved to be quite reliable in Norway?
Yes. That's the overall picture, I would say.
Well, that's cool. Last but not least, personally, what did you find the most interesting about this parliamentary election?
I think the political discussions on TV were not that, didn't really go deep. So I was really not impressed by some of these debates. But it's very hard when you have 9 party leaders struggling to get in a little sentence to speak. They all want to speak, and they have maybe like 1 hour or less, and they have to have to touch various topics, and so it's very hard to get speaking time in those debates. The debates did not have a high, they were not really good. It was more like a show, really. But I would also say it's interesting that in Norway we have many other parties trying to get into the system, but they didn't manage it. So we have small parties on the right side that did not manage to get in. And we also had a new pro-Russian party that got 0.3%. So that's also interesting that the parties who are more like pro-Russian, they got in total 1.3%. That are 3 parties in this group. So we didn't discuss the Russian-Ukrainian war in this election because there is consensus about this among the parties in parliament. The foreign policy thing that was really discussed was what's happening in Gaza, because there is some disagreement between the major parties, where Progress Party and the Christian People's Party will not criticize Israel that harsh as the other parties will do. And the left will criticize Israel very, very harshly and want Norway to take as strong action as possible.
I assume it's a tendency. It's a global tendency we can see throughout the world, all over the world, that the political debates are getting superficial, and everything is about the political show and the communication. Let's hope in time it will change. Now we can conclude that the political landscape in Norway is slowly but surely shifting, it's changing. And that brings us to the end of today's conversation on Norway's September 2025 parliamentary election. We've covered a lot of ground, from the profiles and performances of the key political parties to the campaign strategies that shape the debate, the mechanics of Norway's electoral system, and the social and demographic factors that influence the outcome. A big thank you to our wonderful guest, Dr. Herman Smith-Sivertsen from the University of Southeast Norway, for sharing his most valuable insights and helping us understand this complex election. Thank you, Herman.
Thank you.
As always, thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with others who follow politics in Europe and beyond. Until next time, I'm Balint Toth, and this has been the latest episode of Votes and Seats, the podcast analysis of the MCC Center for Political Science. Take care and see you in the next episode. Goodbye.